If you play saxophone, at some point you have probably thought about getting one of these. And if you actually bought one, you very quickly realized this thing is not that fun to play. Today I want to explain why and show you how I made this whole experience more enjoyable. The EWI is hard to play. It requires extremely accurate fingering technique, more so than on a saxophone for sure. And its response is way more immediate. And on top of that you have this octave roller situation where your left thumb needs to change octaves with this movement, which is a bit weird because we never really train for that in traditional saxophone playing. And that means that you actually have to practice it. I don't know why you would ever want to play an alto sax sound with an EWI, but the manufacturers definitely made sure they got you covered. And apart from those, you're basically left with a handful of half-decent samples that blur the line between cheesy and cringe. Obviously, this is my very personal opinion on the matter, but I think with a little bit of sound design and tweaking, you can make this thing a lot more playable. I'm going to pull up a wavetable. First thing I'm going to do is completely initialize the patch, make sure there's no weird mappings on here. The most important thing that you have to do is set the synthesizer to mono. That way only one note at a time can play, and that already makes such a big difference. Next thing I'm going to do is set my amp envelope like this for now. So the synth is either turned on or turned off. It's not really affecting anything at the moment. I want to map a little bit of amplitude to this. So now you can hear that if I push harder, the sound gets a bit louder. I should probably mention that with most of these settings, it's really about like tweaking, playing around with it until you find something that is comfortable and playable. The idea is we want to design a patch that feels more like a real instrument. So everything that we can do to make it feel more like a saxophone sort of will help us to feel more at ease with it. Grab the frequency knob and completely map this to breath controller. That is kind of a playable sound already. From here on, what I want to do is add a little bit of pitch bend so that we can actually bend notes. And I find that 2 semitones is usually the thing that feels most natural. You can do more. You could do, for example, I don't know, 7. Depends on what you are after, but this can really help to make your lines a bit more natural. Usually with these sounds, I'm mostly using the basic shape. And then once I have something dialed in that feels good, I will change to other wavetables if I want to have like a bit more of an exotic sound maybe. So, but for now, I'm going to use a rectangle, just because that has more overtones and the filter is going to be more active with this. Also, let's set this to 24 dB and make this one of the analog ones, just because they are a bit more juicy. Okay, I like this one. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a vibrato once I press down on the bite plate. And usually between 3 and 4 hertz is a good starting point. And this LFO shall control the pitch. Obviously this is way too strong. And now we're going to map the amount of LFO1 to the mod wheel. And that way, once I press down, it will activate the LFO. I want this to be a bit faster, like around here, and then not as strong, maybe. Let's see. I'm really just trying it out. 0.8. Yeah, that feels better. Okay, so at this point, we sort of have something that is playable, that feels okay. And now I want to introduce a little bit of lag and resistance to this patch, sort of as if we're playing with a harder reed. And that will make it really way more natural to play. What I found is that there are a few parameters that you can tweak so that maybe the sound doesn't start immediately. So we can introduce a little bit of attack, not too much, and we can introduce a little bit of release. And this one is a big one, the glide time. Anytime, for example, where you want to change octaves, on the way from one note to the other, you're accidentally, in the meantime, triggering a different note that quickly turns on until you reach your actual note that you want to play. To cover up for this is use glide time. So what it's doing, it's just adding a little bit of like a glide between the notes. And that way, many times your mistakes, they're really sort of hidden inside of the glide time. Let's see. Yeah, already feels a lot better. From here on, it's really about tweaking these, trying different times. Generally, the lower you can go with the glide time and these settings, I feel is better, but you have to have cleaner technique for this to work. The higher you go, the more sluggish, laggy the instrument or the patch feels. If you already know you're not going to play fast passages, this can also be a great effect. Usually I think 13 milliseconds is fine-ish. And now because I have quite a long release time, you can hear how like it plays really legato. When I play the notes quickly after each other, you can see that we're creating a lot of low frequencies. So I'm introducing a second filter and I'm going to turn it up a little bit just so that we're filtering out the very low frequencies. And that way you can hear the sound is getting thinned out a little bit, but I think in a nice way. You can really dial them into taste. Let's see. Now this is already too much again, I think. It's a bit strong, so I'm going to decrease the resonance. I will also modulate the second filter with the breath controller, but in the other way. So if you push harder, the second filter is going to go down in frequencies and then opening up the frequency spectrum a little bit. So let's grab the second filter, make this a negative value. And that way, you can see that the second filter is now going downwards if I press harder. Now playing this patch, I feel like the first filter doesn't have to open up all the way. So I'm going to decrease this a little bit. Something like that feels good. I usually like to add something for our decay time, for example, a pulse width modulation. So once the sound is established and we kind of push a little bit more air into the instrument, I want to have something that reflects this more intense vibe. There's many ways to do this, like it's really up to taste. Maybe like this. Just a little bit. I'm really just playing around with these values right now. So maybe something like that could work. Just something that makes it sound a little bit more dynamic. From here on, I could go and add a second oscillator to give a little bit more body. I could do that, or maybe find an interesting shape just to play around with it a little bit. But really, I think most interesting thing you can do is change the octave of this or make this a fifth. So that way you're getting a really classic breaker-ish EWI type of lead sound. Oh yeah. And then also, don't forget to add the pitch bend to your second oscillator as well. And now let's add some echo and reverb, just because this needs to live in a real space. And then one little bonus tip that you can do if you really want to emphasize on this being a wind instrument, you can add a layer of air noise. One way to do this is to use the vocoder. You can either, depending on your taste, dial it in with dry wet, like this. Or if you prefer the other way, you can group this and then have a dry chain and a vocoder chain. Make the vocoder 100%, and then you can just dial it in with this volume knob here. Something like that works for me. I think it's a bit too much of echo and delay. Okay. If you like these sounds, I created a little collection of wavetable patches for you to play around with in Ableton. Download is completely free. Link in description. Thanks so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, if you want to know something specific, let me know. I'll be happy to address it, to talk about it. And oh, I think I accidentally stepped on my light switch. Yeah, see you next time. Ciao.